All right, today we're diving deep into a really fascinating 19th century Masonic text. And it tackles this huge, timeless question: how in the world do you handle raw, untamed power? Well, this text offers a kind of blueprint, and we're going to explore it together. So the text kicks things off with this really powerful image. Force, when it's just raw and unregulated, it's like a volcano, an earthquake, a cyclone. It's not growth, it's not progress, it's just pure destructive chaos. You can think of it like a blind giant, just swinging wildly, striking at random. And in the end, it only accomplishes its own ruin. So right away, this sets up our big question. I mean, seriously, how do you tame a volcano? If raw power is just this destructive force, and we know that progress needs something more, how on earth do you contain that? How do you direct that kind of energy? Well, believe it or not, the text we're digging into today offers a kind of philosophical blueprint for doing exactly that. Okay, so first, let's really unpack this problem of blind force. Because, and this is key, the text isn't just talking about nature in some poetic way. No, it argues this chaotic force is something found right inside of humanity itself. And here's the absolute heart of the issue. You've got this immense energy, this blind force of the people. But when it's unguided, when it's just disorganized, it doesn't lead to freedom, it doesn't build anything better. Instead, it just burns itself out. Or, and this is the scary part, it actually becomes the perfect tool for tyrants to grab power and enslave the very people who have all that energy. And this leads to a pretty stunning paradox. The text says it's the force of the people that props up all these despotisms. Think about that for a second. The very same power that could be used to achieve liberty is the exact same power that, when it's misdirected, ends up holding the throne of a tyrant. It's the people's own strength, funneled into armies or just passive obedience, that literally forges their own chains. All right, so if this unregulated, blind force of the people is the problem, what's the solution? Well, the text argues it's not about destroying the force or getting rid of it, not at all. It's about regulating it. It lays out this really powerful formula for turning all that chaos into creation. And here's the solution in a nutshell. Force has to be regulated by intellect and guided by a rule of right and justice. Basically, that raw power needs a brain and a rulebook. The text uses the analogy of steam. It's just useless, chaotic vapor until you channel it into an engine. In the same way, the power of the people needs to be guided by intellect. Reason, wisdom, and a really clear moral compass that's all about what's right and just. And wow, the difference is just night and day. On one hand, you've got unregulated force. The volcano, the earthquake, it just strikes blindly and leaves ruin in its wake. But then you regulate it, and that same force becomes like a steam engine, precise enough to weave delicate lace. It goes from chaos to harmony, from random destruction to building the sublime conquest for humanity. Okay, so to make this idea a little less abstract and a bit more concrete, the author uses a really powerful metaphor, one that's central to masonry, the craft of the stonemason. And this gives us a perfect visual for the kind of political and social philosophy he's trying to build. So we get these two amazing symbols. First, you have the rough ashlar. Think of it as just a raw stone yanked straight from the quarry. That represents the people as a mass, rude, unorganized, full of potential, sure, but also chaotic. Then you have the perfect ashlar. This is a stone that's been perfectly shaped by the hands of a skilled worker into a cube, and that symbolizes the ideal state, harmonious, symmetrical, and efficient. It's that raw potential finally given form and purpose. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand this. This perfect ashlar, this ideal state, it's not some kind of authoritarian regime where everyone is just forced into line. No. It's a symbol for a republic. A state where the rulers get their power from the consent of the governed. It's all built on a constitution and laws that actually reflect the will of the people. Power flows from the bottom up, not the top down. So the text takes this metaphor of the perfect cube and goes even deeper. The author uses its very shape, its geometry, as a kind of blueprint for this ideal state. And this is brilliant. It shows us both its visible structure and its invisible soul. So let's talk about the three faces of the cube you can actually see. These represent the machinery of government that we're all pretty familiar with, right? You have the executive, which executes the laws, the legislative, which makes the laws, and the judiciary, which interprets the laws, the tangible structure of the state. Okay, but what about the three faces of the cube that are hidden from view, the ones you can't see? Well, this is where it gets really profound. They represent the state's spirit, what the text calls its threefold soul. And these are the core values: liberty, equality, and fraternity. These are the principles that have to breathe life into the whole structure. Without them, the government is just an empty, lifeless shell. Okay, so we've built this ideal state, this perfect ashlar. But how is an individual supposed to actually live inside of it? What's their role? Well, the text lays out what it calls a moral decalogue, basically a Mason's 10 commandments that act as a personal guide. The first set of duties are all about looking inward, your duties to God and to yourself. It's about adoring and loving God by practicing virtue. It's about doing good not just because you have to, but because it's a pleasure. It's about understanding your soul is immortal, so you shouldn't degrade it. And it's about being in a constant war against vice. The whole idea here is that you can't build a just state without just individuals. It starts from the inside. And then, from that solid personal foundation, the responsibility expands outward. It moves on to your duties to family and society. Things like honoring your parents and the elderly, protecting innocence, cherishing your wife and children, and of course, loving your country and obeying its laws. And this one's great. A friend should be a second self. It's all about building a moral society, one person, one relationship at a time. But after laying out all these specific duties and rules, the text puts one commandment above everything else, and it's this: a new commandment give I unto you, that ye love one another. It makes the point that if you say you're in the light but you hate your brother, you're still in the darkness. This is presented as the ultimate law. The idea is that without this fundamental love for each other, all the other rules and virtues are basically meaningless. Now, you might be thinking that all of this is leading up to some kind of perfect, finished utopia, right? A happily ever after for society. But the text is way more realistic than that. It doesn't end there. Instead, it frames the entire project of building and, more importantly, maintaining a just society as a constant, unending struggle. Yeah, this philosophy is really a call to action. Getting to a well-ordered state isn't the finish line. It's actually the starting pistol for what the text calls an eternal struggle, a perpetual fight against all the phantoms and superstitions, the bigotries and the constant temptations of tyranny. The work, it says, is never, ever finished. And as a final thought on this fight, the text offers a pretty sobering warning. It says, "Truth conquers slowly. There is a wondrous vitality in error." What a line. It's basically telling us that progress is hard-won. It takes incredible patience and perseverance because falsehoods and bad ideas, well, they're surprisingly tough to kill. The forces of ignorance and tyranny don't just pack up and go home. And that brings us right back to today. This 19th century text laid out this epic, ongoing battle between regulated, intelligent progress and the blind, chaotic force of tyranny. It's a call to action to shape our world with reason and justice. So the question it leaves us with is a big one. The text calls this an eternal struggle. What does that struggle look like today?